We're live. So, I decided that I want to try and write a book. So, I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to try and write 1,000 words, and we'll see if it... And I guess sitting here on stream and talking about it, even if the view count is low, is my way towards doing that. So what am I trying to say? Internet generation. How do I want to write this? One of the things I want to talk about is basically my experiences with the internet since the 90s going forward, and basically what the internet is becoming and is going. Within the last 50 years, humans have developed unparalleled methods. This is okay. Hey Nicholas, how you doing this morning? The internet. Internet is a worldwide system. The internet needs no introduction. It is for many of us has existed, and as far as it knows, will always exist. It represents greatest, one of the greatest tools. What, like, I don't know. This idea has been bouncing around in my head. This is not my first attempt to write a book, but this feels like something I need to get out of my system. So, I'm just gonna keep writing. Tools created by humans. Yet, I wonder, is perhaps gone are today. Many in my generation, others younger, represents primary sometimes. Yeah, well, I want to write I've been wanting to write a book for a while now. I actually told myself I was going to do it this year. It was sort of my New Year's resolution. And then I moved to Greece and my entire life went sideways. But the idea hasn't quite left me. So I want to see how far I can actually get. This is something I'm going to be doing regularly on and off of other content streams. Hopefully this doesn't have the effect of tanking my channel views, which has happened when I do non-tech streams, and the algorithm punishes that, unfortunately. A prayer or only means of connection. And yet, paper sounds. You know, I know exactly what I want to begin with. And yet, I have questioned the cost of this. It was a relatively unremarkable day in Vancouver, British Columbia. I had been up there for personal reasons and was taking the train home, taking the local metro, SkyTrain, back to back home. Normally, it was at that moment I had an experience, one that made me question the world. I had been looking out the window towards the Fraser River, and just so happened to turn to look at the other occupants in the car, I've been looking out the window towards the Fraser River, and I just happened to look at the other occupants. And what I noticed was every single individual was looking at their phone and had AirPods or equivalent stuck in their ears. They were completely disconnected to reality. And that moment has stuck, and it was the strangeness of this moment that stuck with me more than anything. Why was it? Here we had a group of people all in the same room, all in the same, and none of them talking to each other. Like, this moment I had in Vancouver, this one has bugged me for a long time. Like, I was literally on the SkyTrain, and I think the train was going over the Fraser River. There's a large bridge in Vancouver, and it was, as it was going off the bridge, I just happened to turn away from the window, and it was like seeing the uncanny valley. Yeah, that's exactly what I want to say. It seemed like everyone else in the car was just a part of the machine, not talking to each other, not doing anything but staring at their own phone in their own little isolated worlds. Now, I'm not claiming wow, I can't spell today, hold on. Any sort of moral superiority. I've done the same thing many times over. In my hometown of New York, I would often just stare at my phone when on the train or bus as signal permitted. Perhaps sometimes I would read a book or listen to music, but I wouldn't talk with other people. Now, maybe seems weird, the idea of talking with strangers, but isn't that what we largely do on the internet? When I'm live streaming or on talking with people who I only know by a handle. The same can be said when operating on natural radio. Everyone is a call sign. But talk to people. Oh yeah, thank you. Claiming. You know, I should have spell check enabled. Let me see here. Source control, editor appearance. Do I not have the extension for spell check? I like using VS Code as an editor because it just doesn't get in the way. Sure, why not? Okay, this says it's installing. And what's the call center? But if we can talk to people online, why can't we talk to them? Hey, look, I have spell check. I certainly remember striking up conversations on trains, buses, or just at random. In my youth, I traveled the world, living out of a backpack and meeting people from all sorts, from all walks of life. From the tip of Alaska to the heart of China and beyond, I have been privileged to witness how many people communicate. And yet, it seems to me that more often than not, there's a silence, a lack of substance, like we've forgotten how to communicate as a species. Now, I have read plenty of online articles that talk about loneliness. You know, I have this spell checker installed and it's highlighting things, but security problem. Also, it doesn't seem to know what the word online is. Here we go. If I just mouse over. The isolation that many people feel on a day-to-day basis, which is counterintuitive. Think about it. It's counterintuitive. Alright, you know, I think I need a better spell checker. Okay, so if I hit control plus space, but wow, this dictionary is, definitely kind of leaves something to be desired. Counterintuitive, if you think about it. Most people carry cell phones. We are, in fact, always part of the network. And yet the person across from us, seems, and yet we seem more isolated than ever. And this is something that has bothered me for a while. For better or for worse, I was a product of both the television generation and the early internet. I had dial-up internet access since I was 6, and computers have defined most of my life for better and for worse. Hey Robert K. Thanks for the morning wishes. Sorry if I'm not talking that much. This is largely me trying to just get words on paper. But talking about the isolation that the internet creates is something I feel like I want to get down. Well, yeah, and Dash, that's actually something I plan to talk about, that the internet compresses humans to caricatures. Like, how often have you blocked someone on the internet for having one bad take, and then basically define that person by that one bad take? I know I'm guilty of doing that, and I've had to do that in my own Discord server where, you know, you've had to ban someone because of, not because of any one specific action, but simply because, how do I put this? Like, I ban Pepe memes in my Discord, and some people don't necessarily know the connotations that Pepe has gained in the recent decades, in the last decade. And, you know, people then get upset and defensive, and then ultimately the ban hammer has to follow. It probably not explained that well, but yeah. I've been fortunate. In my life, I've had people I've both loved and been loved. I didn't have a particularly good family life, but I went out in the world and found it. But I know I'm the exception. Like, you know, one of the things that always blew my mind is I spent a lot of time in British Columbia. I've got indirect ties to the area. And the husband of a friend of mine is a native Canadian. As far as I know, he's lived in Vancouver for almost his entire life. Has never stepped foot in the United States. And as far as I know, he's only ever left the province to be, like, for a wedding. Like, you know, and it's conversely how, like, there are people in Blaine, Washington, which is literally the last stop in Washington before you hit Canada, that have never gone over the line and gone into Canada. You know, and I don't know. It feels like we've become more isolated. Like, I grew up in New York City. I grew up in the suburbs as a young child, but I was born there, and I lived the latter half of my adult life in the city proper. So I also know that I'm an exception for that, because New York City is one of the very few places that you don't need a car to go anywhere in New York. And secondly, there's people. But I also felt that I was much more isolated in New York City than I ever was living in rural communities. And yeah, Dash, I definitely don't disagree with you on that one. I mean, I'm sitting here live streaming while I'm doing this. And this is something I kind of want to get into. I already know that there's going to be a chapter in this book talking about what I call one-way communication and two-way communication. But I just want to figure that out. So where was I? For better or worse. I don't come from a happy home. The internet was, in many ways, the thing that let me keep. I wasn't necessarily an antisocial kid. I had close friends. But a messy divorce and bad home life meant that by time I was 18, I had lived in 3 states, started in multiple schools, and had gained and lost multiple social networks. You know, I didn't even realize that had changed. I should probably... Oh yeah, that did change. I just realized that I haven't been seeing messages because of that. Dash, thank you for pointing that one out. That's actually true on my side as well. It was on top chats and not live chat. I never use the top chat feature because when I'm dealing with technical discussion, I kind of want to see the technical discussion. Let's see here. Networks. The internet was a constant. Oh yeah, also we're not doing that, so I should change the bot, not to say that I'm currently building. I did upload the video today. It finished uploading to YouTube about 30 minutes ago. I still have to do the subtitles and all the other stuff that comes with video release, but the XP Linux from Scratch video, I'm planning to drop it on June 1st. Yeah, I think either May 31st or June 1st, but I think this Sunday sounds good for it. So, we will definitely see. I'm just going to see our viewer activity, analytics, chat rate. The thing I'm kind of questioning is I'm curious if my subscriber count is going to start going down again, because one of the reasons I stopped streaming Greek on the channel was that. But I think if I'm writing a book, people are not going to care as much. But, I mean, Dash, how long do you think it's going to be before we have people using ChatGPT in place of interacting with other people? It's a constant throughout. Message boards, online discussions. They represented a way to fill social need that I couldn't fill well. In some ways, this was empowerment. When I was living in Alaska, I had simply hopped on a flight with nothing more than a backpack and stayed in Anchorage for a year. During that time, you know, I don't think I want to go down this. My story is... You know, no, I'll leave it in for now. During that time, the internet was both my friend and I would learn the hard way in how also hide details. How? Are you kidding? I really am getting the banner about crap internet today. Like, YouTube says it's not getting enough data, but Streamlabs actually doesn't have the you're dropping packets sort of thing. Details. My life. It's only now in my 30s am I looking. That I look back at it. Past century, humans have gained the ability to communicate at distances. Originally in the form of telegraph cables. No, hold on, that's not what I want to go with. And I realize how strange it is. Throughout most of the last millennium, humans have had the ability to contact. Now, that's... Like, how do I start working through this? When I started taking university classes again, one of the first concepts I learned was defamiliarization. It is the idea of taking something familiar and then questioning it in such a way that becomes unfamiliar. The example given to me in class was a cup of coffee. Example by example, the book broke down a cup of coffee bought in a coffee shop. Broke down specifically how that cup of coffee was made, where the beans came from, and most importantly, a breakdown of costs and how they were paid out. Broke down how that got. The point the book was making was to make us in class think about inequality, since only about 10% of a given cup of Joe ends up reaching the farmers who grew it, who are largely I can leave it with that. Farmers that grow it. Conversely, most of the profits remained. However, the concept of defamiliarization goes further. Because if we apply it to everyday life and what it has become, at least in my case, you start to end up with some very uncomfortable questions. I probably should be reading this out loud louder because I don't know if anyone can hear me over the sound of my keyboard. Yeah, I actually think where that's going. And you start ending up with some uncomfortable questions. Ultimately, this is especially true So, how much have I actually read so far? Because this already feels like this is a good chunk. I definitely am going to write more than that. I'm going to have to open a terminal, aren't I? Terminal. Terminal. 920 words already. So, okay, well that's off to a start. We'll come back to that. Robert, it's you basically hitting the nail on the head. That's definitely something I'm already aware of that. It's something I actually will probably talk about at some point in this. I don't know how much of this I'm going to talk about my own personal experiences, but I do think it will be a thing that happens. But let's just say neither. I was more raised by my grandmother than either of my parents. That's one of the easiest ways to put it. Yeah, right now I'm studying philosophy, economics, and politics from Open University. I wanted to go back to school for some time, but it realistically only became practical now. It took me a while to be able to get all the things in place for that. Start with any kind of questions. And these questions. Okay, so start any of some very uncomfortable questions. So where do I want to go from here? So I think we have the opening to the internet generation. Well, I represent the middle half of the millennials. 37. Also, Generation Z and now Alpha are increasingly feeling how many times have you seen in childhood an icon? And ultimately, what is that child learning or my version, my childhood is similar. It was usually a hand-me-down laptop of sorts, but it was an ever-present. Dash, I think part of that is because my father comes from academia, and it's kind of how I learned to write. Right now, like I said, this is going to be an ongoing process over the course of probably a couple of months, and then it's probably going to get at least half rewritten. Oh, hold on. My voice is my passport. Verify me. Is that better? I apologize. I didn't realize the mic was that low. My childhood, in many ways, I feel like I was the beta test. I was a part of the beta test for the digital revolution. See here. In many ways, I thought I was part of the beta test. I mean, the tentative name I have for this book refers to the beta test of the data revolution. More to the point, what will be the effects of that? It's not like we've had all encompassing can we as humans truly learn to be socialize and deal with the hardships of the world when from even an early age from even an early age, we have access to what appears to be a digital utopia. A place where we can simply be who we want, interact with whom we want, and express ourselves as individuals with no limit. I don't know. I just definitely want to where I want to go with this. No, I'm just going to keep writing. I think when I hit 50,000 words, it will be time to do a major revision session, then writing more. A place where, and yet, that's a fantasy. It only exists within, on the screen. It only exists within the screen. Psychologists have used the term parasocial relationships to describe this. Essentially, we watch a video or a streamer and we feel connected to that person, even though we have never interacted with them. As a content creator myself, I have experienced what this is like on both sides. It also gives us a skewed view of the human, of what a human is. In the digital world, we see profiles, we see messages, and we see profiles and posts. Most of the time on social media, it feels like we simply write a message and then such as write messages to a bulletin board and then see what comes of it. Conversation isn't, people get compressed down to handles, to profiles, and a collection, and to handles, to profiles, and easy to categorize groups. That person is leftist, that person is conservative, that one is LGBT, that one is a fascist, and so far, and so on and so forth. These decisions get made in a moment. How often have you read a single comment from a given in a discussion forum and immediately made a determination based off that? Yeah, you know, this dictionary really sucks. Conservative. That one is LVG. Termination. Immediately made a determination over that. Let me read through what I've written so far. Within the last 50 years, people have developed unparalleled methods of communication. Most of this is due to one thing, the internet. The internet needs no introduction. It is, for many of us, a thing that has always existed, and as far as anyone knows, will always exist. Yeah, I don't disagree, Terrafang Vergorn. Like, I don't know if I'm exactly hitting new ground here, but, and I don't know. I think the point of the book I'm trying to make is what the internet has done to communication. Because, let's go back 50 years. If you wanted to talk about politics, if you were going to do anything with politics, you were going to listen to radio on the television. But if you're going to discuss politics, it was going to be face-to-face. And frankly, while I've had some unpleasant face-to-face political conversations, it's nothing like you see in current day and age. You see part of this is due to the sharp divides in society that we see. In the United States, it would be basically MAGA versus Democrats, but it exists all over the place. Now, these sorts of divides can exist regardless. I mean, go back to the 18th century, you had slavery versus, abolitionists who, and that ultimately boiled over into a civil war. But it took decades for that civil war to build up. Meanwhile, it feels like I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase these ideas. And I think trying to write them out is definitely helping. But, a lot of it was watching how it sometimes feels like the internet's a loudspeaker for stupid. And I think a lot of this is like with older generations, it's people, it's the stereotype of they sit on the couch, watch Fox News and get mad. Younger generations, it's, get angry in online discussion forums. But in the past, there used to be political movements, and the last few that we've seen as part of the digital era have really, people describe them as leaderless. I mean, there was the Occupy movement, there was Arab Spring, there was no one person exactly throwing fuel, there was no one person to lead, and instead you basically got a mob of people showing up, and with no leaderships, the movements died out. Thank you, Blit It Up one. Let me see here. It's a good view of what human is. Here. So where was I reading? Just counterintuitive. No, I was further up. It probably is GNU Dick as far as the dictionary. I'm gonna have to find a better way to do this. Now, I'm not claiming any sort of moral superiority. I've done the main scene. Nope, further up. And yet, I've questioned the cost of this. It was a relatively, I can, in fact, pin down the moment that was... There was a single moment that really put it in perspective for me. It was a relatively unremarkable day in Vancouver, British Columbia. I had been there for personal reasons, and I was taking the local metro, the SkyTrain, back home. It was at that moment I happened to look away from the window and see the other occupants of the train car. What I noticed, it felt wrong. If I had to describe the emotional memory, the singular word is wrong. It just looked wrong, it felt wrong, and yet there it was. This wasn't something that felt like it should exist, and yet everyone there was completely oblivious to it. I don't disagree with that. I legitimately don't disagree with that. I mean, how many times do power corrupts, and realistically, many people that, become a leader that become change, in turn becomes changed by the system to corrupt, through corruption. The fear, power warps, fear warps, like, I don't know if someone, like, there are exceptions to that rule. Like, there are people that essentially go into power and then use that power to make things better. I would say Franklin D. Roosevelt was one of those with his New Deal. That was during his first and second term, not his time as president during World War II. There have been others throughout history, the ones that are like remembered as the greats. But, over time, you see more terrible ones. I think one of the ones that make me think of... I was watching an Adam Curtis film the other night, and it made a point that made me stop and kind of think about it. It talked about how during the Clinton presidency, which I'm just old enough to remember, Clinton had wanted to essentially build out a large number of social programs and such, but at that point, the national deficit was scary, although not as scary as it is now, and effectively was told that there wasn't money. And I would have to actually cite I'd have to find a primary source for this, but so the documentary went, Alan Greenpeace, who was the I think he was head of the Fed at that point. Greenpeace is an interesting character. He was part of Aaron Ryan's collective. He was involved, he was one of those people that took Atlas Shrugged and saw it as like a Bible. And Atlas Shrugged is an interesting book. And I'm definitely going to touch on Atlas Shrugged in this, because in many ways, I can make the argument that Atlas Shrugged is Gates Gulch for the idea that it is a place without rules except for what you define. And I don't know, that idea I think I need to let percolate for a bit longer. Greenspan, you're right, Greenspan, thank you. This is the problem with doing it all off the top of my head, is I have to still look up names and such, and I've never had a particularly amazing memory for names. Measurement Actually, the word is wrong. Everyone's completely oblivious. Even now, I feel like I'm the odd one out. This is a scene that plays out day after day. Now, I still find that moment settling. And yet, that moment plays out again and again every day. Recently, I was on a bus to Athens, and I was practicing Greek on my phone. Everyone else there was just engrossed in their phone as much as I was. You know, I'm going to scratch that sentence. And yet that moment plays out every day, and I'm fairly certain that if I were to get on the SkyTrain today, I would see the same thing I saw then. And if I were to have, it is sometimes I feel like the only one who sees problem with this. But what can do? I am one person. Even now, yeah, I mean, feeling shred, the reason people get involved, the reason, it's more why people get involved with cults, and, well, let's be honest, I don't think that's an inaccurate description for certain far-right supporters. But a lot of it is, it's the idea that we will take care of you, that you are part of something. I mean, if you really start going down if we dial the clock back to 2010, Pizzagate. If you remember what Pizzagate was, it was the idea that the rich and powerful were doing things that I can't say the word for on YouTube, in tunnels under a pizza parlor. I mean, that's something that would get people up in arms. I mean, it used to be, think of the children actually was not completely ironic. There was like, we need to protect children from X, Y, and Z. And people bought into it, not because it held up to any sort of logical facts or scrutiny, because it was something that they could believe in and get involved in. I mean, that's where QAnon got its start from. You know, I also freely admit I mean, well, I get the impression that many people, if they met Jesus today, would call him they would start at hippie and would go down from there and would not be able to stand a word of it. I freely admit that I am part of this problem. I've done the same thing many times over. And yet, when I was younger and commuting to school back and forth on the train, I do remember having conversations. It wasn't frequent, but it did happen. in 2008, I took part in an impromptu New Year's with strangers. People would strike conversations. I did so myself from time to time, especially on long haul flights. And yet, at the same time, actually, I already made that point down here. Seems weird talking with strangers, but it isn't that what we largely do on the internet? We see a post, we comment on it. See a post, we comment on it. If we're in chat room, we might just throw a message out. If we're watching a live streamer, we might comment in their chat. Almost always, these are conversations with strangers who we know nothing about aside from a handle and sometimes a profile picture. No, that's not where I'm going with phone bad, book good. I don't think, I'm not going to make that argument because frankly, I don't think the argument, where do I want to describe this? It would be hypocritical for me to say that the internet is all negative. It would be hypocritical of me to say that digital communication has no purpose. But what I do question is the isolation that we've created through it. Like, it's not so much put the phone down as what are we creating? What have we created? Especially given the fact that, like, internet dickwad theory is going to be, like, such. I will release it at some point. I may make it available for editing to Patreons, but until I've actually done writing the damn thing, like I said, this is kind of just the prelude. And even then, I'm not exactly sure this is where I want to go. It's kind of why I'm live streaming this, because when I talk things out on camera, it actually does make things, for better or worse, easier. And I just can't bring myself to talk out loud in a room by myself. That makes me feel like I'm a little too close to straight jacket territory. It's like, if I put it the other way, if everyone was just sitting there reading a book and not interacting with anyone at all, I don't think it would be all, the same problem would be existing, is that we're not communicating with others. Like, yeah, I was never much of a newspaper person, but I do remember reading a fair number of hardback books on buses and trips until probably about 20, and then I started getting motion sick. It's actually why I don't use my phone on buses. I can do it on a train. I can't do it on a bus. If I try reading on a bus, I get motion sick, and it gets bad. I think, like I said, I'm still not sure. Like I said, I'm kind of just riding by the seat of my pants, and I'm still deciding if this is where I actually want to go with this. Actually, I do actually think I've gone down a tangent that I didn't actually intend to go. I used to be able to read on public in cars. I can, like I said, I don't get motion sick on trains, but I find bus travel extremely difficult. Yeah, I don't know if I'm super happy with what I've ran here, but it is a starting point. I think I want to flesh out. Let me write some additional. I think I need to put a little structure on this because this is not where I think I want to start. Let's see. What did I originally call this? Let me just write some notes for myself. So, internet generation. Discuss those who were brought up with the internet. Compare and contrast to the TV generation. Yeah, I one of the things I was going to talk about was like the TV generation. It feels like a product of this age. Just seems like just what you're supposed to do. This is now how we interact with others. This is how you keep and yet it feels like just the unspoken. It's only as I write this do I find. I would say TV generation would be boomers and early millennials. I'm right in that middle period where the internet started replacing television. But I guess it would be the 80s, 90s stereotype of just plopping kid in front of television and have them watch it. Like my grandmother, like I said, I was mostly raised by my grandmother, and the most distinct memory I have of my grandmother is that she was always watching something on the television. Like, when I got home from school at 3 p.m., I'd get home to the house and she would sit in the living room and watch something. I was usually up in the house's attic, which was where my computer was, and I'd be on the internet. At 5 o'clock, we would sit, have dinner, and then we'd be watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. On weekends, if I was with her, it was like always watching Price is Right at noon. Like, of anything, that is the single most crystal clear moment of my grandmother. On at least on my mother's side. My father's side, it's a little bit more complicated. Like, I actually do remember conversation and such, but it really this was like something I was going to get down to is we walking this back to the TV generation, then the radio generation. One of the main reasons that the Third Reich was as I hate to use the word successful, but I don't know what term to use. But one of the biggest points that they did to promote their ideology was the use of propaganda. And one of the biggest ways they did that was with film and by radio. And there was this thing, I don't know what the actual German is for it. It translates to essentially the People's Radio, but it was a very cheap, low-cost radio that anyone could basically buy, and it just tuned in to the state propaganda machine. And it basically told you, I don't know if people here have actually ever listened to, like, honest, real propaganda. I mean, to some extent you do it whenever you turn on the internet or look at a site, because everyone has a view, but, more... This is what you're supposed to think. This is what you're supposed to do. And then we all, yeah. No, and that was the other thing that that was it. Volksem Fenner. Yeah. And this was kind of what made me decide that this idea, because I've recently blew the dust off my amateur radio set. I've had a passion. Amateur radio has a special place in my life. And unfortunately living in New York City is about as counterintuitive for running a radio, it sucks for running a radio station. I'll just put it like that. But actually getting back on air, it was the realization that the only sort of communication that I have seen is literally just QSOs. It's been, call sign, calling CQ, which is radio lingo to any other station. Someone responds, you confirm the response, and that's it. Like, the idea of nets, the idea of communication, they haven't gone completely extinct, but they're dying. And like when I was in Portland, I tuned into a bunch of the 2-meter nets in that area, and I'm 37. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of those on air were late 50s to early 70s. People that had grown up with radio in the generation before. Now, what makes this the most maddening thing is currently there's more licensed amateur radio operators than ever. But newer operators are not getting on air. The vast majority you see is like the automated QSO. There's no sit there, learn CW, and start, sending messages in Morse code. I do hear some single sideband voice, although my reception of it isn't great. But again, it's just basic QSOs. The only real active nets is you have the trash fire that's 7,300 kilohertz, which is essentially the 4chan of radio, and marine maritime nets. Like, those are the only active ones I've seen on HF. And when I look at it like that is... Because I always hear stories of how radio was better in the good old days. And to a large extent, I chalk that up to nostalgia. But, as I'm sitting here is... The radio, more than anything, gave us the capabilities of the internet. My HF radio set... I have successfully worked 6 continents on my HF radio set. Now, granted, that's modern, and modern technology, but even with old vacuum tube sets, you could do that. Like, it was harder. You needed better gear, and there was a lot more operator skill, but, I've heard plenty of talks of having conversations on CW. And... ... It seems like the only time people fire up the radio is just to treat contacts like multiple choice, or not multiple choice, like a MMOG. I've actually had that video as the world's oldest MMOG, amateur radio. But, I've been looking at this, and it's like, when was the last time you had a thought-provoking discussion in real life? When, I'm not talking like reading a book. I mean talking with another human and thinking that human had a point or learning something. And I mean, I hate to go into the true crime thing, but I was watching a video from Imperial, and it was talking for a hunt of like one of London's greatest gangs, and the police traced the perpetrators to an anarchist bar in London. And the biggest takeaway from that is the idea of an anarchist bar, or like a bar for a theme, like the idea of like, you know, queer bars exist, so forth and so on, but like they feel like they've become a rarity, if not extinct. Like the idea where you sit and talk with people going out, like the last few times I've been in a bar of any type, it feels like people are just there to get plastered, not to actually sit and socialize. And maybe that's just me. Like legitimately, this is maybe just me. But about a year ago, I went. I did a backpacking trip for Europe. And it was the first time I've done that probably in about 10 years. I think the last time was probably when I was in my mid-20s. I don't remember having a single conversation with anyone. Like, it used to be I would sit in hostel bars and I just find groups and such. Now, part of it was I wasn't traveling alone on this one, but I don't remember a single time I struck, you know, like I had an actual conversation with someone just randomly. Yeah, I mean, Waycrest, you're completely right. I mean, and if we take it a step further, you know, broadcast over the air television, it existed prior to World War II, but it really didn't become affordable until the 50s and 60s. You know, the idea of sitting and watching a show and then it's become the alternative to like existence. Like this is why I've been looking at previous generations, because the boomers were essentially the TV generation. They were the ones that would have grown up, at least the more well-off houses would have grown up with a television set. And that's in turn given way to the iPad generation. Like I fall right in between the cutoff between this, because God knows I remember being plopped in front of the TV just so it'd be quiet and kept out of sight for a period of time. Like that was the thing. Now, I'm an only child, so I also know that my experiences are not going to be uniform. I'm going to sit, grab a drink, and then I'm going to write a little more, because I think I'm getting somewhere with this train of thought. Alright, I'm back, and I have a cold soda. But I think I want to definitely keep that train of thought going. I definitely agree with the idea of having conversations in cafes, but even that seems to have gone poof. And part of that's because going to a cafe has become so expensive. Yeah, mosque vax, I don't think you're wrong about that. I mean, my grandmother was active in her church group. I know that for a fact, but that was like her only social interaction. And I kind of got the impression that was the case even long before I came along, but... Alright, I definitely... Let me see here. Where did I leave this off? I think I want to start going down that rabbit hole. I find how strange it sounds when put to paper. Hey, Lucy in chat. We are talking about communication in the internet right now. This is, like I said, this has been a topic that's been on my brain for quite a while. Alright, as only as I write this do I find it strange as paper. And yet... what bothers me the most is that it was only as I started looking both forward, backwards, that I saw that this wasn't necessarily a new phenomenon. Wow, I just can't spell today. Well, I can't spell on good days, but, you know, days, necessarily a phenomenon. After all, the term TV generation was old when I was young. The idea of just sitting in front a magic box that told you what to do, what to think, and more. Now, that what the even worse, I feel like it seeped. Dude, I was old when I was young. Backwards, that this wasn't necessarily a new phenomenon. Thank you, Lucy. I should promote you to resident spell checker in chief. Product of this age. So I need to put it in paper. And that, I suppose, is the point of defamiliarization. We take the internet for granted. We take how we communicate in the digital age as something that has always existed. And we never question it. In fact, we don't even question what immediately came. Well, I mean, in New York City, social spaces have basically vanished. Like, there are a couple left in Manhattan, but the idea of like just having a place where you could go sit and do something, like there is Central Park, there is other places in the city, but jazz clubs, you know, that's actually an example. I remember it wasn't jazz per se, but when I was in Bosnia, I remember going to this place where people would sing and play folk music right on center stage. And it was a large social event. There was probably about 60, 70 people in the room. There were so many people smoking, you couldn't even see the ceiling of the theater. That's really what I remember of it. And I was thinking, you know, I remember reading that there used to be jazz clubs. There used to be like just relaxed social places to go. And what? It's like they've all vanished. Like even in Berlin, which was notable for its nightlife, it only felt like there was a handful of very ritzy clubs left that would probably be like 100, 200 euros to go to or get in if you could get in at all. It's like the idea of a casual smoky bar has just gone away. Like even, before the pandemic, 24-hour diners and coffee shops had become very rare in New York City. After the pandemic, I struggle to name one. I think maybe TikTok in near Manhattan, Times Square was still open, but it's like for the city that never sleeps, there doesn't seem to be anything still open. Well, I mean, Ole Coop, you've got the point. I mean, that's what people do. They socialize on the internet. Friends playing on a Minecraft server, that sort of thing. Or either on a private server or they join together on a public server. That's what it is. But Minecraft has taken the place of real life, and I question if that's a good thing. Like, actually, I think that's something I actually want to write down. In fact, we don't even question immediately what came before. Well, I am in a Mediterranean country. Even then, it's... I'm not going to say it hasn't happened here. I'm just saying it hasn't reached that. Like... Hold on, I got to turn off my speakers because they're getting feedback. Like, how do I want to describe this? This is a global phenomenon. It just hasn't affected everywhere at once. Like, yes, there are places where it's been going, but at the same time, look in Germany. Germany, you see the same sorts of rise in extremism. You see the lack of opportunities for the youth, the lack of social places. People that identify more with something like AFD than they do with anything else. Like, yeah, it's happening. I mean, even then, those spaces have become more and more rare. Like, when I moved to Jersey City, there was a 24-hour place, and it was gone, and less than a year after I moved there. Like even just for diners, like the only thing that was open late by the time I left Jersey City were the food carts. Immediately came before. We take the internet for granted. We take how we communicate in the digital age as something that's always existed, and we never question it. In fact, we don't even question it. We take the internet for granted. We take how we communicate in this. We question how we used to communicate before. It was only after I looked real hard at the parallels that came before. After all, what is the real difference between kids engrossed in an iPad and those just watching television day in and out? Yeah, I'm gonna have to be with Build It Up One. It doesn't matter whether it's free software or not. I mean, let's be honest, you talk on Mastodon, it's not exactly all that different from Twitter in terms of how you actually interact with it. So anyways, as such. Term TV generation was old when I was young. Where do I want to go from here? Such that I want to phrase that better. It's the thing that has kept us connected. It has at least given voice to those connections. This feels like a non sequitur going from these two things. I lived through this transition point. For better or worse, I had mostly unrestricted access from the age of 6. Access to the internet, dial-up, age of 6. When the internet was largely unavailable, I lost countless hours of my life to television. I mean, Lucy, I could definitely see that. I wouldn't mind having a co-author on this. I would like to write it. I like to publish it, but I'm not going to go through a traditional publishing house. I will almost certainly self-publish this. I'll probably bind it into an ebook, stick it on the Amazon market, put it in my store for like $5, and then sell it, and then probably have after X number of years, have it automatically fall under Creative Commons. I might just Creative Commons it from the word go. I don't really need the money. Like, I honestly don't need the money. It would be nice to have the money, but it would be... But... I feel, looking in hindsight, this had more negative. I learned a great many things from that type of upbringing. But I also learned a great many evils and a frustration. People, frustration about the state of the world. Frustration from that type of upbringing. I quickly learned to use the internet to expand my knowledge of anything I wanted to know. Most of my skills in my professional life were derived from things I learned on the net. And yet, I question if it's a good thing. It was due to the internet that I slowly remember feeling isolation being the defining characteristic of my life. Part of that isn't necessarily due to technology. I have a sleep disorder, which finds me... Part of that isn't necessarily due to technology. I suffer from non-24 sleep-wake disorder. I am physically unable to maintain normal. No, hold on. I don't mind talking about this, but this is where I want to put that into. Part of the difficulties I have to deal with in the physical. Part of that isn't necessarily just technology. But I also can't say it's all bad. I suffer from a sleep disorder. One that's been present since I was an infant. It's called And the long, short of it is that I am unable to maintain any sort of regular sleep cycle. Anything that must be done on a schedule is the bane of my existence. And thus, the internet is probably what has done more to keep me sane than anything else. You can only spend so many 2 a.m.s entirely by yourself before it begins to wear on you. I have had friends, the internet, better or worse, at least ensured I wasn't alone through those really long periods of isolation. It's for that reason that I don't necessarily seek, and yet there has been a change. But even as I write that, I still find myself questioning one simple thing. While the internet may have improved my life as it is today. Oh, Lucy, if you hit me up on Discord, I'm probably going to write for maybe another hour, but I'm definitely getting somewhere here. Despite what the internet has enabled to do, question how much it truly benefited most of the experiences that made me who I am were away keyboard, were is it? In more recent years, I felt like I felt like I was the beta test for the digital generation, and I can't help but feel like there's some major problems. Having now experienced, I feel like beta test. I have watched net change and grow, and have my own hand in building these systems. Not many people can say they have been both sides of the screen. So, let's step back and dig down so we can understand how in a digital age we feel so alone and isolated. This is your host. I don't know if I'd actually put that in a book, but I actually think that works as a forward. Yeah, I actually think I do like that as an introduction. Intro. What do I want to call this? Alone in a sea full of IPs, the internet experience of 2025. Ooh, I like that. Where do I want to go with this? Do I want to go into the early history of the internet or on communication? Think yeah, I'm gonna stand up for a moment before I keep writing. I've written more than I want. I've already reached my goal, but if I can get more down, I'll get more down. So I'm gonna take a brief break. I'll be right back. I think I know where I want to go with this. Because I think it's the first time I had the idea articulated. I just need to check one thing. I have to fact check myself. Yeah, Mildred was the name. Mildred, the artificial reality. Fahrenheit 451 is one of those books that's seen. This I specifically want to go into something from Fahrenheit 451 here. Was well before its time. Fahrenheit was one of those books before. Written by Ray Brandberg. It It's set in a world where intellectualism has, for want of a better term, gone outmoded. I have not read 451 in a very long time. The main character is Guy Montag, a firefighter whose job it is to burn books. And through a series begins to question the world around him. There's a certain irony to me writing about 451 because I was a volunteer firefighter. The idea. Now, I don't know if I want to include that. However, Bradbury's book was largely dealt with the idea of censorship and the destruction of ideas. He was influenced to write the book due to the book burnings in Nazi Germany and the repression of the Soviet Union. Mosvax, I definitely agree with that to some extent, and let's be honest, the law still really hasn't caught up with the digital era, because the people that write the law are, by and large, well, geriocracy in the United States is not exactly controversial opinion. It's more a statement of fact than anything else. However, one aspect has always stuck in my mind, and it's Montauk's wife, Mildred. The book, Mildred essentially lives in a virtual world surrounded by screens. I'm going to have to reread the book because I am doing this off a very I think I read Fahrenheit 451. I didn't read it in school. I know that for a fact. I read it on my own. I think I read it about 10 years ago. I remember Mildred very clearly. Surrounded by screens that were filled with vapid react people. As Montauk begins, one of her greatest wishes is to get a fourth screen, in effect cutting herself off from the world large and replacing it with a fabricated family and life. Book. At one point, conversely, Montauk begins to question his work as a firefighter. He eventually steals a book and reads it and finds it fascinating. He eventually... I'm going to have to reread Fahrenheit 451 for this section. I'm pretty sure I've got the main notes right, but I suspect I've got a fair number of the details wrong. He eventually tries to talk with Mildred about some of the things he read. But Mildred shies away from it. She does not appear to want any interaction with the outside world and prefers to live in her fantasy. Fantasy and fabrication of life. She does not want the outside world. The character of Mildred feels like it's a representation of many of the so-called terminally online people I've met. It doesn't exactly matter what a given person's fantasy is. It's just that no information or facts can enter that reality and disrupt it. What makes this interesting for those of us who were trapped in unpleasant or unwelcome situations. How do I want to put this? I'm actually just flipping through Fahrenheit 451's Wikipedia page because I am trying to remember the details of the book. I also want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting. I'm going to have to actually, like, research this one properly. Like, I think I'm going to have to put citations down. But Mildred in the book lives in essentially... they're described as screens in it, but it's essentially a room... I kind of the impression I'm getting from my memories is like living in The Sims. I don't remember if this artificial world that Mildred lives in is interactive or it's completely passive. And I know that a lot of people have taken 451 as like a rant against new media and such, but I don't think that was the actual intent. I think it was, let me see here. Oh no, here it is. From Wikipedia. As time went by, Brandenburg tended to dismiss censorship as a chief motivating factor for writing a story. He claimed the real messages were the dangers of an illiterate society infuriated with mass media and the threat of minority and special interest groups to books. What? There's actually a citation for this. Alright, I'm going to have to actually go through, read the original sources, and cite them. Like, I'm actually going to have to sit down and do that. However, over time... became concerned about mass media. And I want to just make sure I'm not actually plagiarizing Wikipedia by accident. Because like I said, I'm just flipping through Wikipedia on the other screen to kind of remember the book. However, it has also become a tale about hold on, I actually have the citation here. And yeah, I'm going to actually have to sit through and go through the citations. In the book, this is expressed through the character Mildred, who is Montag's wife. We are given no context for this. It's at the start of the novel. Screens and is hopeful that Montag will earn enough money to purchase a fourth one. We don't know if Mildred always this detached from reality, or she entered the virtual world. She entered the virtual world. We never are given any sort of context of why Mildred withdrew from the world in this fashion. At most, we're given some indication that Mildred is not an anomaly. The screens she uses to isolate herself are commodity products, and she speaks her friends having just as many as she does. Anomaly. Okay, commodity products. It is within the world. Okay. Furthermore, Montag never questions. Should I use it? Yeah, I think never questions this. For his wife's behavior. Until after he has the discovery. Which, at the start of the novel, has likely been going for some time. It's just accepted. Conversely, however, Montag himself what strikes me the most, though, there's just one thing. Fahrenheit 451 was written in 1950. Actually, you know, I'll put the exact year down. It was written, when was it written? I think it was not 53? Yeah, 53. In 1953. Computers, as we knew them, but then today, didn't exist. The internet was still 2 decades out from being created in the form of ARPANET. Even television was not ubiquitous at that point in history. And yet, Randburg was able to capture the idea of isolation. I don't think I'm doing a good job explaining this idea all that well. Okay. game. Place I could go to escape. I think for many of us, this place I could go to escape. It was safe. For want a better word. I think most of us have a Mildred inside of us. The part of us that wishes to retreat from the world, not interact with it, and instead exist within fantasy. Perhaps that's just part being human, but now, with modern technology, it's effectively, people interact with AIs in place of conversation. We watch content curated us by algorithms. The fantasy world of Mildred's we all have the ability to check out of reality and embrace a world that simply tells us what we want to hear. We can even customize it with subscriptions, follows, likes, and dislikes. But can never be more. The advent of VR and things like Neuralink, perhaps in a decade or two, this virtual world could even replace our physical world for all intents and purposes. Did I? Oh yeah, it's not an anomaly. Wow, 2,500 words already. There's something to be said about just sitting here chatting on stream and focusing to get things ran. I definitely am going to be doing more tech streams. Curated. All right, let me do a quick editing pass. Cure. Checking out of reality. In the book, this expressed through the character of Mildred, who is Montauk's wife. it is not questioned, just as we don't question our interactions with the digital. However, just because the majority doesn't question something doesn't mean that individuals won't. How do I want to flesh out this idea more? I definitely feel like this is definitely building on where I want to go. Like, this feels like exactly the prelude I wanted, because Fahrenheit 451 was written in the 50s. The issue that we see in the digital age is not new. It's older. The fact that when 451 was written, the internet didn't exist. Computers didn't exist. I'd say even television as we know it didn't exist. Yeah, the Roosters are, they're cocky little bastards. The thing is, like I said, I actually remember what stuck in my mind more than anything was Mildred. I just remember that scene so clearly. I remember 451 being very hard to read through. The latter half of the book, Mortog finds essentially, I believe he was a retired professor, and he basically starts carrying a radio, and the professor starts explaining life to him. And it ultimately culminates where the chief of the fire department catches that Montag has been smuggling books. And there's a confrontation. And in the confrontation, it's revealed that the chief of the fire department, the one that is basically in charge of this book burning operation, himself was an avid reader and decided that the world of books and the information within was a net negative. He basically gave himself into the mass consumerism of the world of 451. Montag kills him with his flamethrower. And he goes on the run. And that part of the book I don't actually remember the specifics of. I remember how it ends. I remember he encounters, I don't know if it's in the finale or earlier to the book, but essentially people that have decided to memorize books so that they could survive them being burned. But the very finale of it is that the city that he's in is bombed, and it appears to be the beginning of an all-out war, implied to be between the Soviet Union and the United States. And Montag at the very end basically comes out of the rubble, and it actually ends on a somewhat optimistic note, essentially saying that the old world is gone, but we can build a new one. Like I said, I would have to actually sit and reread it. Like, the only things that stick out heavily in my mind is the beginning, the scenes with the scenes with Mildred, and the confrontation with his boss, who his name I can't even remember. Like, 451, a lot of the middle part of 451 I felt was very long-winded, but just because something's long-winded doesn't mean it doesn't have a point. Now, how do I link these two ideas together? But here's the thing. When we think of digital escapism, or losing ourselves to cyberspace. Concept. When we think of the isolation within society, we think that it's new. Except there's one thing. Time of writing. It is, at the time of writing, 72 years old. Years we know don't exist. So, how is it that Brandenburg so accurately right of what our current world feels like 70 years, decades before the technology would be created? So how is it that it's simple? The problems of the digital age go back further. I think we're only becoming more omnipresent. However, an astute server go back further. Huh. Alright. I'm gonna stand up. I definitely think I'm cooking somewhere with this. Like, as I start to write this more and more, this is definitely starting to feel like the idea in my head is actually getting out onto paper. Alright, I'm back. I am back. Let's see here. Physical world for all intents and purposes. So where we're... No, I actually think this is a really good lead-in to where I want to go. Because... Alright, door's closed. Fortunately, I have to have the window open or this room overheats, so we're still going to hear the roosters. But I actually think this is exactly the lead-in I want. Because we talk about the isolation, the loneliness of the modern internet. How we've basically, for want of a better word, lost our ability to communicate. And I introduced defamiliarization. And then we break it into Fahrenheit 451, which describes much of what is I mean, the Polish cam, like, I don't even remember, you know, I don't really remember 7-day mutes. Like, I remember, like, some places having it, but I don't remember it ever really being used. Like, I put a muted role on my channel for timing out people, but it doesn't get used very often. It's, because in general, once you have to start muting someone, like, it sometimes happens if a conversation gets really heated, but more times than not, what tends to happen is it's the same person over and over again. And at some point, you just kind of take a stand, and the tool just proves that it doesn't solve the problem. Just in the past. How long is this section? Because I think I don't know if I'm going to keep chapters in the actual thing. I'm starting to actually think of, like, as I'm writing this, I think the rough draft I will put under Creative Commons non-commercial. So it's just under 1,000 words. I'm thinking I might put the rough draft under Creative Commons non-commercial, and then I'll do the revised version as a for sale thing. Because one of those things about ideas, like, if you put, like, write a, I don't know, how do I want to put this? If you put a self-help book out, you know, no, that's not the right analogy. How do I want to put this? I don't want to make it seem like I have something to gain by pushing a narrative. By making it available for free, I avoid that, but I would like to be able to have some profit off my work. Because unfortunately, we live in a society, and in that society, I have a powerful need to eat. But I'm not completely sure how I'm going to do that. Because, like, a lot of the influential works in our time, in our history, you know, the idea of modern copyright is an anomaly. You know, what limited works was the cost of distribution to be able to print that. But even then, ideas like common sense and such were either collected in anthologies that were printed. Like, sorry, I'm rambling. Let me try and put things together. A lot of, like, revolutionary ideas in the early history of the United States were in the form of flyers and pamphlets that were handed out, basically free of charge. Thomas Paine's Common Sense was one such work like that. Other writers would basically be collected in anthologies of larger writers and then published together. Thomas Jefferson and the other founding fathers had the Federalist, which essentially wrote out their ideas as a newsletter of what a new government would look like as the United States started pushing its way. What would become the United States would start pushing its way towards independence. And maybe that's where I need to take this. Maybe this is the opening, and maybe I have to advance these ideas in the form of, well, I guess it would be a mailing list. I mean, one of the few things that I've never struggled with in my life is writing. Like, I can sit down and punch out a script. I've been writing for 2.5 hours, and I've written 2,500 words. When I was in college the first time around, I could punch out a term paper and get a B on it in about 3 hours. Because I think writing about ideas is one thing, but if I don't have a way... Talk is cheap, solutions are hard, and that's kind of what the problem is, if I more get down to it. When was the last time you heard someone with a solution for the problems of the world? You know, take for example, climate change, and I hate to, this is the most thing. When you hear, when you listen to the talk of Extinction Now and other climate rights groups, they all basically demand end of oil, end of carbon, blah, 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 blah. And I agree with them. Let's be honest. Climate change is an extinction threat for the whole damn species. But what you don't hear is an actual viable solution. Sometimes you hear nuclear brought up, but nuclear... I would say modern nuclear has probably solved a lot of the safety problems of old nuclear, but... it mostly comes down to build solar, build wind, and kind of ignores the political reality of why oil runs our world. What is reality? I am not going to insult the intelligence reader by providing a dictionary definition. Reality is what we experience as humans. It is essentially how we see the world and how we interact with it. However, one may argue, nuclear reactors is what I was saying. Because one of the biggest things of oil is use of energy, but the problems are deeper than that. Like, oil is what creates plastics. Oil, well, not the only component, is an essential form of every bit of computing. Every bit of plastic in a computer is a petroleum product. There are other ones. I mean, cobalt, lithium, they all have fairly high environmental costs. The every cell phone cell phones and consumer electronics, I think, are about 10% of all carbon emissions. Like, it's not just an oil problem. But short of telling everyone to live back in caves and use candles, where's the actual solution? I mean, this is why you hear a lot of pushback from politicians on climate change. Now, this is different than climate denialism, although the two overlap. It's like, this is like a very deep philosophical thing, so I'm not exactly sure how I get the words out. But the only solutions to things like climate change is a fundamental restructuring of society. And in some ways, you're right. Coal to oil. For the purposes of this conversation, it's equivalent. I could say fossil fuels, and it would cover it. But most people cannot envision a world that systematically changes, drastically changes. Like, for us to be able to get off carbon, it either would require advances in technology that would completely obsolete the carbon process. The discharge of carbon into the atmosphere, which is happening, but is likely not going to happen soon enough. Or we would have to drastically change as a species to stop depending on it. Now, such things are certainly possible. I mean, the Amish live without electricity. They live largely in isolated, self-sufficient communities that prove that at least is doable. But most people would consider you insane if you proposed it as a serious scenario. I mean, Karl Marx, his version of communism, was a fringe theory from when he wrote it. It was only after, essentially, Lenin used the ideas of communism to build the Soviet Union did that idea really gain traction, which is, I think, about 50 years after Marx published the Communist Manifesto. I want to say it was about 50 years. Like, the idea was basically rejected wholesale. Now, I'm not convinced communism can actually work as a system, but the idea was basically rejected out of hand except for fringe parts of society. But it found roots because of its messages of workers' rights. That's why people did support it. And then, well, we got the Soviet Union and the Cold War as a result of that. Like, I don't know, that last train of thought feels incredibly half-baked to me, but the only reason that communism was able to flourish in the Soviet Union is because no one wanted to keep the system as is. No one wanted the Tsar. No one wanted Russia, which was effectively starving due to the First World War and the corruption of the governments there. It was that. Oli Coop, nuclear reactors in some ways is the answer, but it's not the answer. And the reason for that is that power plants are only a part of carbon emissions. Lithium-ion battery manufacturing, every bit of you can't make plastic with nuclear energy. You can only make energy with nuclear energy. So what's the alternative to plastic? What's the to build smartphones you need high-grade silicon, which as far as mining goes, that one's actually not all that bad. But you also need Kobanese, which is largely comes from Africa. It's one of the main reasons of why Africa tends to have a civil war every 2 years, like clockwork, like in DR Congo, because groups fight over the mines, and whoever takes over the government controls the mines and thus gets the revenue, lines their pockets, and then the cycle repeats and repeats and repeats. Yeah, I mean, and that's why communism was considered a viable alternative, because the system had become unimaginable in keeping it. But a lot went wrong in Russia. Like, Russia under the Tsars had largely been undeveloped land. It was basically two cities in the form of Moscow and St. Petersburg, and basically it was a whole lot of empty. Lenin himself, I think, said he used the quote that they had conquered a half-savage people. And I mean, serfdom was still going on in Russia as late as well into the late 1800s, when it had been abolished throughout Europe for centuries at that point. I mean, and then to take it further than just oil, you know, the cost of every, like, electronic device we have, you know. The cat in the box is the real cause of conflicts in Africa. Yeah. You know, one of the things that has always surprised me when I've done reading about Russia is how Trotsky basically called it on how the Soviet Union would end. If Lenin had lived, Lenin was a dictator, but I do wonder what would have happened had it been Trotsky instead of Stalin that had taken power. It may very well have been exactly the same thing, but who knows? So going back to reality and my definition of it, the intelligence of the reader by providing a different thing. Instead, you know, I'm just going to scratch that sentence. I don't need it. Reality is what we experience as humans. It's essentially how we interact. However, no two people experience life 100% the same. There can be shared, even among brothers and sisters, there are differences in how we experience, in what we can experience, and how we process it. As such, reality is different for For some people, reality is a place of happiness and excitement. For others, it's a place of pain and suffering. These realities are real for their observers. Just as I write about my concerns with digital communication, there will be dozens, many, who, due to their experiences, will say I'm wrong. That's the problem with reality. It is, in fact, just a series of beliefs with no objective truth. No, I don't know if that's exactly how I want to say it. It's the right idea, but that's not exactly, that doesn't come across in the way I want to put it. These realities are real for their observers. How do I compound? Where do I go from here? Reality is what we experience as humans. others is pain and suffering. For some of us, we embrace it. And for others, we reject it. The question thus becomes, is there an objective reality? Is there one view that is more correct than any others? Some might say science is objective, but belief in science is a choice. Belief in science is a choice. It is possible to have a fully consistent, internally consistent reality. Same. Can't necessarily No, I feel like that's a logical fallacy. It's closer to the point that I want to make, but that's not the point I want to make. Question has become, is there an objective reality? Is there one view that's more correct than others? As individuals, we like to think that we are right. We want to believe that our view of the world is correct. We might base that claim from things science or religion tells us, but ultimately tells us. But claims can the idea of a correct view of reality can be based on the things science or religion tells us. In fact, I would hypothesize that most people's worldviews are based on one of these two things. However, there are people who reject science. Conversely, there are people who reject God. Religion and the concept of divine. I don't like specifically want to drop God in this discussion. That's just a way to get people to tune out. To the members of each of the... For a man of science, the idea reject science. For a believer in science, One might dismiss reality of a devout believer, writing it off as nothing more than superstition. Conversely, the reality a believer can be seen. How do I put this? Devout. No, because it makes it sound like you can't have belief in science. Religion. It's easy to think of one of these if you thought there are people that reject science, conversely there are people that reject religion. If you I think I rat-holed myself because I think this is not the question I need to ask here. If I try and talk about the nature of reality, I think I'm kind of going down the rabbit hole. And I'm not convinced that that's where I need to go. I think the point makes sense. I just don't think this is where I need to put it. Let me... what I usually do in my documents is I usually just keep like snippets near the bottom that I might want to save and come back to. So if I want to go down this rabbit hole, so I go from Fahrenheit 451. I think my brain is sort of debating going down the radio rat hole, because I was going to bring radio up in this. I knew that this was building up to me starting with radio, because that's actually what made me think about this. Was my recent interactions on amateur radio realized was the same sort of lack of communication I see in the real world is something I'm experiencing on amateur radio. Now, that may have also been true 10 years ago when I got my ticket. But in the 1950s, radio would have been the dominant medium. I mean, television was around, but you wouldn't have been able to afford... Actually, when was the transistor radio created? I want to say the transistor radio actually existed in the 1950s. '47, yeah, 47. So it was just coming onto the it was just starting to become ubiquitous when Fahrenheit 451 was written. I'm sort of tempted to ask the basic question of where did the idea of a manufactured reality come from, but that one I don't think quite does it. Like, if I go into the question of what is reality, I think I'm going to lose the reader. Like, I'm reading it myself, and I think I'm losing myself into the words of the philosophical. I think it's a point that needs to be made at some point in the book, but Plato's Allergy of a Cave. I'm not familiar with that one, so that needs a read. Allegory presented by the Greek philosopher Plato in the work Republic to compare the effects of education and the lack of it on our nature. In the allegory, Plato describes people who have spent their entire lives chained by the necks and ankles in front of an inner wall with a view of an empty outer cave wall in the cave. They observe the shadows projected on the outer wall by objects carried behind the inner wall. This is actually what I was getting at. I had not actually read this before. I've actually haven't read Plato. And I have that horrible feeling if I go down the, if I probably find it really fascinating, and part of me now kind of makes me want to read Republic. But I'm also thinking my head might explode if I do that. But yeah, this is actually what I was trying to get at in the reality section. So, okay, so I've successfully managed to reinvent Plato. Okay. So that's something. I think I'm starting to hit the point where I've reached the end of productive writing. How far am I? I think I want to push. Let's see if I can push the 3,000 words. I'm going to mull on this for a few minutes, and then we'll see what I can actually get down pen and paper wise. right, chat. I'm definitely thinking right now, like, the idea of the defining reality is important, but talking about causes, like, I feel like it's not the argument that I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to figure out the actual point. I think when I finish this point, I'm going to call it for the stream. I like it because I can just save it in Git, and also black on... I either use Word or I use this, and I like my text to be text. I will typeset it at some point. Hey, and also, hey, Carmich. I'm tempted to say the question is, where did Mildred's world come from? But I don't know if the book actually gives us enough details, so I think I would have to make a hypothesis. Pandoc and Typesys are your friends? I don't know. Maybe I'll load up WordStar on CPM, and we'll next time I do an editing stream, I'll do it. I'll do it in CPM. I won't do. I'm going to do another tech stream probably tomorrow or the day. Maybe tonight. I have a Greek lesson usually at 6. If I'm still this side up. Right now, my NAS is offline because I had to snag its power line adapter, so my central archive of like vintage software is currently Kaputski, and the new adapters haven't arrived because shipping anything to Greece, even within the EU, takes flipping forever. I was astounded. I've been astounded by this. You order something from Germany, and it takes a month to get here. At least I don't pay a whole lot. Like, I don't pay a whole lot for the shipping, but my God, it's not fast. And in some ways, I actually do kind of appreciate that because the instant gratification of Amazon Prime is probably not a good thing. Where did Mildred's world come from? All right, I gotta look at the plot synopsis for 451. I am actually going to have to reread the book. I'm just reading the synopsis now, trying to remember. Yeah, I'm actually going to have to reread 451 because I realized this is... I wasn't planning on bringing it up, but I just realized... as I was sitting here right now, I realized this is exactly what I wanted, but my God, I'm going to have to sit and read 451, and I'm going to have to edit it into this. Where can I get Fahrenheit for? You know what? I just remembered. I have a digital library card. I'm pretty sure. I don't think Fahrenheit 451 is in the public domain yet. I'm almost fairly certain it's not in the public domain. I assume Amazon has it. Hold on. Public domain. Will not enter the public domain until 2049. No, in the United States, it won't enter. It's 70 years after the author's death, so it will not enter the public domain until 2074. Although it might be in the public domain here in Europe, because I know Europe has slightly shorter. But I don't think it's actually in the public. Is it? Let me see if it is. Yeah, no, it's not in the public domain. Doesn't look like it's gone to the public domain anywhere. I was hoping it might be here in Europe. Wow, that's a fucking ripoff. Amazon has it as an ebook for $12. I'm pretty sure I can. I'm pretty sure I can get it. I'll deal with it. Oh god, that's a thing. So apparently it's the best of book talk, and that's TOK, which implies that that's a TikTok thing. Oof. Yeah, okay, so apparently Amazon is promoting books based off social media recommendations. The synopsis on Wikipedia, though, did remind me of a few things. Yeah, I forgot that... Let me write some notes for myself, because I'm going to have to make some revisions. 451 begins the question around him. Ed note, reread for Fahrenheit 51. I mean, anything that helps libraries is a good thing, I'll be honest. I don't use TikTok. I've posted a couple shorts on this channel, but I've never really gone into it. But I kind of think this is the right question. I don't think the book, from what I read of the synopsis on Wikipedia, and I'm actually going to, when I shut this stream down, Fahrenheit 451 is a pretty short book. It's only 154 pages, so... I could read it in an afternoon, so that's not exactly a big deal. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't go into details of it. But some of the citations from Wikipedia is definitely worth reading and going from, because there's at least 3 books that talk about Banbury's life and the influences of 451. Which, if I'm really going to go down the rabbit hole of where did this come from, that's where to start. Go back and edit it. So... in a more broader sense, Bramberg was influenced by the great age of radio when it was at its absolute height. And then radio became television. And then, yeah, I think my homework here is I'm going to have to sit and take notes on Fahrenheit 451. And then add the citations. So, yeah, I think... Do I want to call it here? I mean, I've definitely hit my word goal. Where did Mildred's word come from? So let me add some to-do notes. To-do, read Fahrenheit, read 451, take notes with page numbers. I already think I know what Chapter 2 is going to be. Chapter 2... It's going to talk about radio. We're going to specifically go into this. Radio and reality. I actually see exactly where I'm going with this. Like, this is suddenly becoming a lot more clear where this book is actually going to go. Radio and reality. So, yeah, I need to read Fahrenheit 451. I've got to do some additional stuff with Brandenburg and the Great Age of Radio. Yeah, I've been at this for 3 hours. I think this is a good stopping point. So, I think I'm going to call this here. I'm going to go sit and read Fahrenheit 451. And then I'm probably going to live stream later. Yeah, I think I'm going to... maybe not today, but probably tomorrow. I don't know if it'll be writing or something else, but... I'm actually fairly satisfied with that. Alright, anyway... This is your host and commander signing out, wishing you all a pleasant day.